Hello everyone, welcome to the Crystaly Recapped channel. And now you're going to hear a short review of the movie The Mill. Joe Stevens, a middle manager, wakes up in a strange triangular well enclosed by concrete walls. The only landmark in the middle is a stone millstone in a round chute. Joe knocks on the iron door nearby, asking for clarification on the mystery of this place, but no one answers. Suddenly he hears the voices of his colleagues from the neighboring concrete wells, politely asking him to be quiet. Only one poor man next door, through the ventilation grill, dares to explain that Joe was pumped up before being brought here, and now he is in for a hard time. When the other man leaves to go to work, Joe tries to get out, but he can't. Suddenly, a dry ration with a bottle of water leaks through a crack in the door. Joe runs to the door and begs the guard to let him out. He's a manager, not a worker, and he shouldn't be here. But the guard is relentless and hits him in the arm with his baton. Tying the limb with a tie, Joe is forced to wait for further developments, eating dry rations. At 10:30 p.m., the company's projection turns on. A female voice announces that he is a participant in a training program designed to improve him as an employee. The projection turns off without answering Joe's question. Instead, the neighbor on the other side of the wall explains that here, ordinary workers work for the good of the corporation, improving its performance. No names are mentioned here, and at midnight the most inefficient employee is fired. Joe doesn't know what that means, but when the time comes, he hears heartbreaking screams of pain. Then a woman's voice explains that the firing has taken place. In the morning, a neighbor explains that this is how the company motivates its employees to work harder. When the next distribution of rations begins, the guard behind the door warns him that the cell must always be clean. A neighbor advises him to throw garbage and waste into a special hole in the corner of the triangular well. As Joe does so, he notices a strand of hair in the ground that leads him to a buried skull. The neighbor explains that it was the previous workers who failed to handle the load. He explains that when applying for a job at Mallard, each worker signs a bunch of documents. Thanks to these papers, the company can do anything with them, including professional training. 5 minutes before the start of the working day, the projection tells Joe that his efficiency in the company has dropped, and with it the efficiency of the department, branches, and as a result, the entire company. So he is here to motivate himself. To begin with, he needs to score 50 points per working day, otherwise he will be punished. 1 point is awarded for a full revolution of the stone disc, and at midnight, the employee with the lowest score is fired. After the beep, Joe gets to work, pushing the millstone around its own axis. The whole day goes by like this as he pushes, and the projection on the wall plays ads about how great Mallard is. At 10 p.m., when the work is over, Joe has 100 points, twice as many as usual. He goes to bed, trying to ignore the screams of the woman who was fired. In the morning, the manager discusses the score with his neighbor, who warns him not to say how many points he scored for the day, because then the opponent only needs to score 1 more point. Then Joe talks about his pregnant wife. They are expecting their first child. Finally, the neighbor warns that if Joe tries too hard, the company will not reward him, but will simply increase his daily rate. As he starts his next shift, Joe recalls how he and his wife were looking at a new big house. With these thoughts in mind, he has already scored 150 points. Later, however, a security guard orders him to go to the door and take off all his clothes. Afraid that he scored the lowest number of points, Joe complies. When the door opens, he finds himself in a dark corridor, where he is doused with water from a water cannon and soap is thrown on the floor. In the morning, he and his roommate discuss the meaning of what is happening. He says he doesn't know, because their work is meaningless, because they don't produce anything, they just roll the stone. When Joe runs out of water in his bottle during the day, he asks for more, but his neighbor says that the company only provides the bare minimum. The purpose of the event is to open up the horizons of the staff's capabilities, to find out how far they are willing to go. As the manager continues to work, he remembers his pregnant wife. She wanted to come to work, despite the doctor's ban, to pay the bills. Joe was told that he would be promoted soon, but in fact, this prospect has been looming before him for several years, but to no avail. Deep in thought, he scores 370 points in 1 day. As he falls to the floor, he sees Alex's name scrawled on the handle. According to the neighbor, he is a local legend, a man who managed to get out of there alive. Joe wonders why the facility hasn't been closed, why Alex hasn't told anyone about how the corporation abuses its employees. In the morning, Mallard presents John with an engraved, personalized pen as a reward for his record-breaking achievement. He sarcastically snaps at the caller, and immediately afterward, his daily goal rises from 50 points to 370. The voice says that by striving for a better score, Joe is getting better himself. With nothing to do, Joe starts spinning the millstones, but after the first round, the score is not counted. His neighbor explains that he was fined, and now the score goes for 2 rounds. Stunned by the innovation, the man sets to work, but by the evening he realizes that he is not in time. In the evening, the projection informs Joe that he has failed to meet the standard and let his colleagues down. Perhaps to motivate him better, the company should bring his pregnant wife Kate to work with him so that he will perform better. Excited, Joe vows that he will still meet the target, as long as the corporation doesn't touch his wife. A woman's voice gives him a second chance, but makes it harder. The annoying red light on the wall turns on as a reminder. He starts working. At some point, he begins to hallucinate. Joe sees himself in a suit. The glitch mocks him, reminding him that he is just a cog in a huge corporate machine that can be easily replaced. Joe's lie makes him want to give up, but remembering his wife and future son, the manager finds a second wind. At the last second, he scores the last point. The projection praises him, canceling the previous punishment. In the morning, Joe is shown a video of his wife from the hospital as an encouragement. She gave birth successfully while he was working there. However, the man is in a completely different mood. He asks a neighbor about Alex, who successfully got out, and the neighbor advises him to look at the wall in the blind spot. There, Joe notices a crack. Finding a pen, the manager uses it to chip away at the putty. The work is slow. But after a few days, he chips open a hole and finds a ventilation tunnel. After consulting a neighbor, Joe crawls out through it. He finds himself in pitch darkness. When he bumps into the handle of a similar millstone, Joe realizes that he is in the next cell. Then a bright light in his eyes, after which he is beaten with a baton by a guard. Joe regains consciousness in his cell. Mallard raises the standard for all workers to 1,000 points as a punishment for the selfishness of an individual worker. In addition, the guards break his cellmate's leg so that he cannot even stand up. The neighbor admits that he is somewhat to blame for the system. As an IT specialist, Mallard created an artificial intelligence that was puzzled by the constant increase in efficiency. As a result, the system developed its own methodology for motivating staff, constantly raising the bar and demanding the impossible to maximize performance. Realizing that he is only dealing with a machine algorithm, Joe suggests confusing it. If none of the employees are working, then the one with the lowest score cannot be fired. Joe and his neighbor shout out their idea to the others. They all agree. This goes on all day, but a few minutes before the end of the workday, the projection explains that the system is foolproof. All employees with 0 points will be fired. The frustrated workers start spinning their wheels. A neighbor convinces Joe to follow suit. Otherwise, he will die. Because of the fracture, he can't even stand up. With tears in his eyes, the manager obediently makes the turn, scoring the minimum score. In the interval between the end of work and midnight, Joe talks to his neighbor, and he confesses that he is Alex. His escape was unsuccessful, but he hoped Joe would have better luck. When midnight comes, the guards come to the neighbor's house, and Joe puts his hands over his ears to avoid hearing his screams. In the morning, Mallard reminds Joe that he must obey, not rebel. As a motivation, he is shown a video of his wife with a child who is already learning to walk. Unable to believe that so much time has passed and he has not seen his son, Joe breaks down. He punches the walls, ignoring the projection's warnings. He is sentenced to immediate dismissal for damaging company property. The cell door opens and 12 employees with tablets come out. They stand neatly in a row along the walls without saying a word. Soon a guard appears with a tray of syringes and capsules. As he puts on his gloves and fills a syringe, he tells Joe that he loves his job, especially the firing process, and that the guard will soon be promoted as a valuable employee. Then he will move to a new location, possibly to Joe's house where his wife lives. Joe attacks the security guard and beats him. During the fight, the projection notices that the security guard has failed in his task, and he will be immediately fired as an incompetent employee. The sly artificial intelligence suggests that Joe carry out the dismissal process to cancel his own resignation. However, the manager suddenly stops, looking at his bloody fists and what he has done. Unwilling to stoop to the level of an unquestioning slave, Joe stands up from the beaten guard and shouts that he will not be obeyed and quits. The shot changes to Joe in a suit, sitting at a table with sensors on his head in a room full of similar employees. His eyes are open. He doesn't realize where he is. His supervisor, a man with the face of a security guard, approaches him and tells him that Joe has successfully completed a professional training program and has earned a promotion. He explains that the program has a side effect, and it takes time to realize that it hasn't been months, but only 1 hour. The manager praises Joe for his work and invites him to a new office a few floors up. While the manager is silently recovering, the other person is constantly praising the company, where there is always room for career growth. After bringing Joe to the new office, the manager shows him around. Closing the door behind him, Joe sits down at his desk, pulls out his phone, and calls his wife. It's the first time in 10 years that he's called during the day from work. He listens to her voice and sends greetings to his unborn child, while reliving memories of the retraining program. After finishing the conversation, Joe looks around the workplace, preparing to start working in the same triangular office, only smaller. The only difference from the simulation is that now he does it voluntarily. But remembering how he dreamed of seeing his son instead of burning out at work, Joe looks into the camera and says he will destroy this corporation. This is the end of the movie. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this.